Welcome to our fourth podcast of Talking Water Honestly. I want to thank our Executive Director and CEO of Louisville, MSD, Mr. Tony Parrott, for the opportunity to execute his vision of gathering experts in the water sector to share their challenges, solutions, and lessons learned. My name is Zonetta English. I'm the Strategic Initiatives and Project Delivery Director at MSD. Also, I have the esteemed pleasure of being the Community of Practice Director for Resilience, for WEF, which includes the Utility Management Community. Talking Water Honestly's mission is to develop content to assist utilities across the U.S. to solve their water challenges and share their expertise. This investment will save our organization critical resources and provide small utilities access to vital information. In addition, these conversations provide an avenue for our ratepayers to gain insight to the intricate and complicated issues we face in providing critical services to our communities and introduce you to an array of dedicated water professionals. Welcome. Our topic of today's podcast is diversity, equity, and inclusion, State of the Union. This podcast has been in development since last year. Prior to our current administration, we recognized that a lot of utilities were looking for best practices to improve their programs, but recognized the increased temperature on the topic. As a whole, wastewater utilities in the entire water sector has been very resilient. We are the model compared to other industries, and we often don't get that type of credit. As of 2022, it's been estimated that in the U.S., the water sector has an economic impact of over $300 billion just in the U.S. alone. However, I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge on the water industry, we receive a lot of state and federal grants and loans. We do have an imminent concern, how to retain the best talent. Despite any policies and economic pressures, it has been demonstrated during all these challenges, two things stay for sure. Talented employees will always have a job, and they work where they feel welcomed and valued. I want to thank our panelists for agreeing to be a part of today's discussions. Today, we want to explore the different perspectives from a membership association, from a legislative perspective, from a utility perspective. We talk about supplier diversity programs, customer assistance programs, workforce development and recruiting, and from a private consulting perspective, in terms of equal opportunities, promoting STEM in our communities, internship programs, and MBE and WBE partnerships. I do want to take a moment of personal privilege, and I want to acknowledge, and this is based on my independent interactions with Hazen's staff, not because we work with you guys, but just for over my involvement with your staff in various capacities, that one thing for sure, you have hired a brilliant group of professionals from diverse backgrounds. They are compassionate about the health and safety of their communities. They're eager to learn. And I've been totally impressed by some of these young professionals. And I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge Lydia Russell, Ann Musini, Dr. Shrew Gadini, David Osborne, Ashley Mitchell, and Danielle Penfield. Dana, I just want to thank you for hiring such great young people. And without belaboring any more time, I'd like to turn it over to our moderator, Jamie Decker, who's a senior associate with Hazen and Sawyer. Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you very much, Zanetta. And again, thank you for all of our panelists today and part of our discussion. Again, a very timely and important topic that we want to get into on Talking Water Honestly. So with us today, I just want to introduce each of our guests. So along with Zanetta from Louisville MSD, we have Kellie Watson. Kellie is the General Counsel and Legal Director at MSD. We also have Steve Hamai with the Water Environment Federation. Steve is the Senior Director of Culture and Belonging. We also have Terrence Jennings from the City of Baltimore Public Works. He is the utility policy manager there and oversees some of their equity programs with their customers that we'll hear more from today. And last but not least, we have Gary Hobner. Gary is Vice President and Regional Manager here at Hazen and Sawyer. As well, he's one of our board members and oversees our Director of Employee Engagement, which is part of one of our topics of discussion here today with that. So We've got an esteemed group of people here, all have a diverse backgrounds and perspectives, like Zanetta said, that we want to dive into today. And so as we get into that, Kellie in particular has a very unique experience and background and expertise to really be able to speak to diversity, equity, and inclusion from her HR and equity and legal background. So we want to start off our conversation today with, Kellie, if you could maybe just share a little bit about that background and your expertise, especially as it relates into your work within utilities at MSD and as well as with diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Sure. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you all for having me here today. I am a attorney by trade, but I've had the bulk of my career in state government or local government, and I started working in local government. And I won't say when, but as a affirmative action specialist, and then began from there to work as the executive director of our local Human Relations Commission, where I was over the agency that took in complaints on employment and housing and public accommodations and hate crimes. But we also certified minority and women and disabled owned businesses as well. Left there and went to work for the state, where I was the executive director of personnel management and the acting executive director for the Office for Civil Rights and Small Business at the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet. So that was a culmination of everything that I had done at that point, but I was there for a bit and came back to work for local government, where I was the director of human resources and labor relations. And the second administration of that Mayor Greg Fisher, I was the general counsel and legislative liaison. And the third administration under Greg Fisher, I was the chief equity officer, all before I came here to Louisville MSD as the equity and compliance officer, and now the general counsel and legal director. So I've seen all the iterations over the last 25 years of what DE&I, as we now call it, is. And that has been my perspective, and also as an equity officer and an attorney. So,
Yeah, that's really unique background and perspective. And so I'm really curious, obviously there's been a lot of press and discussion around DEI this year and with the new administration. And I know a lot of that legislative cases have been changing on a daily basis, but could you provide a little kind of background and some of your own perspectives on that and on some of the executive orders as well, Kellie?
well, I think, as I stated, I started off as an affirmative action specialist and a director of affirmative action, right? So I've seen the iteration of all of these, however we want to define them, right? But affirmative action is mainly around compliance, right? And that comes from Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, where it says all employers have to be an equal employment opportunity employer, which means you're not discriminating in how you hire, how you transfer, and just the terms and conditions of employment for anyone that is in a protected class: race, ethnicity, color, gender, age, disability. Other statuses were then added, such as there's different statutes around for veterans. Pregnancy was included as a special one as well. And then you can go forward with sexual orientation and gender identity in some places, right? But basically, you're saying, as this employer, for anything that touches the terms and conditions of employment, I don't discriminate. And that's usually what was related to affirmative action. When you look at that, you have a disparity at times, right? You look at the availability of people in communities that can work and what type of work that they do. And then as an employer, you would look at your own workforce and see if you had any underutilization. And then you would come up with a plan to close that gap and try to make sure that your workforce looked like the community. Well, that's affirmative action. And that was all, as I said before, it's compliance. So you're training and you're doing all these things to make sure that you have an environment that is inviting, that is inclusive, that is welcoming, and where people feel like they belong. And that's what led to what was then just diversity and inclusion, right? You want to make sure with diversity that you have those numbers that I just spoke about, right? The demographics of the people, your workforce. And then inclusion is just your work environment. It's your culture. It's the way people feel when they want to come to work. It's the values of the employer. Do you value your employees? Are they engaged? How do they feel when they want to come to work? Are the opinions, their beliefs, the work culture, what does that look like? And so ultimately what you've got is a going past compliance, past that affirmative action bit, past the fact that you're saying I'm not discriminating against people. And then when you add in equity, you're really looking at meeting each employee like where they are. You want to remove the barriers that they may have to success, right? You want to ensure that everyone has the same access to networks, to resources, that they have the same opportunities overall to succeed. And that's kind of what equity looks like. And I will say that those are just my definitions as I explain it and how I go. And so you'll come to people that'll have many different definitions, but and ultimately you want to have an environment where people feel like they are valued, like they belong. You want to bring in people that will have diverse opinions and thoughts, and those things lead to innovation. Those things lead to the success of the organization. Everyone is there giving their best and all of their talents and treasures, right, to that work environment, because that's where they feel that they are valued and honored in that way. And sometimes that goes past just what their salary may be. It's employee recognition. It's being included in decision making. It's being communicated with in a way that you trust your organization and even your supervisors and your managers in that way.
Yeah, I think that's really helpful, Kelly, and obviously there's lots of definitions out there, but even for our discussion today, just helping to put some definition around what DE&I looks like, and especially that focus on the culture within our organizations and how that impacts that. I know we've talked before again, and I know these are changing every day, but are there some other legislative cases, especially around supplier diversity and other programs out there that that you could share a little bit more about, and how that's how utilities are impacted by that or utilizing that?
So if you think back to 2020, when most of the country was experiencing not only just COVID, but some sort of civil unrest, when we watched what happened with George Floyd, and locally here in Louisville, Kentucky, with Breonna Taylor. And so what you saw then were the physical manifestations of the racism, of that just played out on everyone's TVs, right? And so you had organizations all over the place beginning to say, well, we're committed to inclusion and valuing our employees and committed to that diversity of thought and opinion, and statements all over. Well, now we're kind of experiencing the whiplash of that, right? And now you're seeing lots of cases and lots of words that are saying that DE&I is a bad thing. Well, it's actually not a bad thing. It's really what is expected of organizations and what's expected of employees who are looking for work. And that's the type of workplace that they would like to engage in. So you started to see lots of cases coming about from different places, mainly a couple of different very conservative agencies that were filing complaints across the country in different jurisdictions, but all kind of culminated in the Supreme Court Act decision with Students for Fair Admissions decision that involved Harvard and I can't think of the other school at the moment, and I should know that. But ultimately, what that decision did was, under Title VI of the 1964 Civil Rights Act, under the Equal Protection Act, they said that trying to have race as a factor in the decision of employment, in hiring, was not going to be something that was going to be permissible anymore. That if you had a program of such where you were using race as a factor, and you were trying to create in Harvard's case, right, a very diverse student body because of the benefits of them not just learning from each other, but how that created a learning environment for everyone and enhanced those opportunities, was no longer going to be permissible. And why it was that way under Title VI was because they are recipient of federal funds. So that's kind of the sister act to Title VII. And that if you are any type of agency, particular governmental agency that receives federal assistance in any way, loans, grants, whatever that may be, you're also saying that you are not discriminating. And so with that as the basis, many more cases have come forward that are challenging that fact of race or as a factor in whether it be now in contracting, if someone has a supplier diversity program, of course, in hiring and promoting, or any type of changes in what they will call their terms and conditions of employment. So there are many cases that have led up to this that are still making their way within the court system. But in actuality, what you're seeing is that if you have any type of quote affirmative action program, that you have to have actions that are very narrowly tailored to the goal of what you're trying to accomplish. And in most cases, that goal is trying to correct some sort of past historic racism, right? And that underutilization that I mentioned before. And so the goal now is to say that this is not a factor, that there is an actual level playing field, whether it be in higher education and exceptions, whether it be in employment, or whether it be in contracting and procurement with some of the things in the cases that we have seen so far. All of this has led to the question that you asked me, which is these presidential executive orders that we are now, that are also now being challenged and making their way in the court system as well. So you had one, which is Executive Order 14151. And that is directing the U.S. Attorney and the Office of Management and Budget to terminate all discriminatory programs, including illegal DE&I, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and accessibility mandates that are in policies, programs, preferences, or anything within the federal government. And it then directs the federal agencies to terminate all those things by law, to then get rid of anything that had an equity action plan, equity actions or initiatives or programs, anything that looked like it's going to include DE&I as far as their performance requirements for employees, the people that do those things. And then they have to also look at an assessment of what those things cost, who is doing them within their agencies, and then recommend even further any actions they may take that are going outside of that. So I will say that most of us, anybody, utilities included, are not discriminating, right? We don't have anything. We don't know what illegal DE&I is. If you recall, DE&I is about creating that inclusive culture, right? Where all of your employees feel valued and are giving input and they're engaged fully and willingly, which is leading to the betterment of your organization, to them professionally, as well as to innovation and efficiencies within the utilities or any other employer. So right now we're all kind of grappling with, well, what is illegal DE&I, right? And the main thing that I can say at this point is I don't know either. And it's very vague, and those definitions and questions are making their way in the court system right now. The other executive order is Executive Order 14173. That one does away with the previous executive order from 1965 called Executive Order 11246, which basically says if you receive federal funds, then you don't discriminate, and the people that you're contracting with don't discriminate. And it requires them to put forth things and data around how they hire, how they advertise for hiring, their policies and procedures with their own employment, yours as well as a recipient. You have to report on those things as well. And then you're also looking at the subcontracting of that as well. Executive Order 11246 was revoked in that DE&I-4173. Sorry for all the confusion with the numbers. But there are pieces of that that are still okay. And one deals with
Okay.
veterans and another deals with accessibility. And so once again, we're all still waiting kind of to see how this is going to play out. Those were done in early January with an effective date 90 days from there. So we're March the 12th. We probably have till the early part of April
Okay.
to take effect and
Right.
figure out or give our own interpretation of what that will mean going forward to stay in compliance with those executive orders. But I would say um, that the executive orders, of course, are the presidential privilege to do, but the statutes that are the undergirding of most executive orders are still in place. So that would be Title VI and Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 are still valid at this time. And trying to interpret what those executive orders mean and still meet statutory compliance are the challenge of the day.
Yeah. Well, Kellie, I mean, that's a really good, again, background and understanding of where those orders have come from and where they're at today, and again, how that's, how utilities are interacting with those and still trying to understand those. And I know that changes on a daily basis, so I appreciate your candor and your input on all of that. That's really helpful. As part of this discussion. And I want to, just, it's really good understanding that basis from kind of the legal and legislative perspective, but I also want to get kind of, again, just from a national perspective, I want to ask Steve just to, as part of, the Water Environment Federation and the work that you do, that's obviously been, diversity, equity, and inclusion has been a big part of your strategic plan. And maybe you could just open up with a little bit about just your, WEF's commitment to DE&I and how that moving forward, obviously with everything happening around the country now, just what is that looking like, and what are some of the different things that you are communicating out to other state agencies and utilities around the country?
Thanks, Jamie. And thank you for having me on this panel. It's really great to be here with all of you. And, like everybody else, the Water Environment Federation, or WEF, as we are affectionately known, is having many active discussions in regard to DEI and the water industry as a whole. And, it starts for me at a place where we as WEF have a strategic plan whose vision statement leads with a life free of water challenges. And what I'd like to say in that is the intent of that is a life free of water challenges for all, or for everybody. And what that really means for us is the need to then really think about the different experiences that people have in regards to the water industry, and an understanding that not everyone really interfaces with or experiences the effects of our industry in the same way, and that we have to account for those differences in being effective in freeing everyone from water challenges. So, the foundational element of DEI is really baked into the language of our vision and our key sort of strategies with that. As an organization, we have, reach not only across the United States of America, but other countries, including Mexico and Canada, as well as internationally. And in listening and talking to all of our partner agencies, consulting firms, public utilities, and whatnot, we hear very consistent sort of themes coming from all these folks, which is items like an aging, graying workforce and a need to replace folks into really decent jobs that really help sustain communities in a very positive way, with the utmost care for our environment and the people. We also hear about the advancement of AI and all these new technologies, which all come at a cost. And even associated with that, I would say, is the cost of doing business, the cost of construction projects, of digging in roads in the right of way, building stormwater tanks and green stormwater infrastructure, sewer systems and whatnot. Um, and that brings into questions of affordability, right? Because in the end, you and I and everyone else in this room, we all pay in one way or another rates to utilities to have clean drinking water and to have that water not only coming inbound into our homes and commercial businesses, but then leaving our place of residence or business and making sure that is being treated properly and released back into our environment in a safe manner. Um, and that affects everybody. And it involves everybody. We like to say that, you use us every day or you partner with us every day. You just don't really think about it a lot. And that's part of the message for people is to really understand the critical elements of our industry and in our society. And to that point, we understand that as a lot of agencies in the utility industry are faced with let's just say a graying workforce, that there's opportunity to bring new voices, younger voices into our industry. And that as many communities facing changing demographics themselves of who pays their rates and demographically comprises their community, that we want to be truly representative of that we want to embrace everybody because everybody has wonderful stories and wonderful solutions to share. And so our job is to really embrace all of that into a cohesive plan as we move out to really promote our industry as a strong and healthy and sustainable and critical, very critical industry for everybody.
Yeah.
I think just in listening to Kellie and talking a lot about all the sort of different laws and legislation from years past, as well as things that have been happening recently from the new federal administration. One of the key things that we'd like to talk to people about is not only considerations about affordability and who can really come along with advancing technology, but also thinking about who gets left behind. Because while we intend to have benefits for everybody, we know that both historically and currently that there are definitely populations of people who are unable to play with us, who are unable to come along, or unable to afford all that we'd like to do. And so how we go about designing our efforts to make sure that everyone benefits, but also shares in the burdens of what we do and does so in a fair manner is really important to us as a key value. Which really leads me into the last part of what I'd like to share here, which is a very deep understanding that all of us here today on this podcast, but all of us listening intently in the coming months to this, a willingness to understand how we not only all benefit from DE&I, but that we actually practice it all the time in our own homes, in our workplace, and in our communities. But we just don't always recognize the things that we do as being aligned with DE&I. So we give some really pointed messaging about how you, as perhaps a parent of, say, 3 kids or 2 kids, and you as a goal want them to be successful, or you as a supervisor of 3 or 4 employees, you understand that success of your uh, department or your work unit relies upon everybody contributing. Um, so we all share in a common goal of wanting success and happiness for everybody, but that we're all somewhat situated differently. We all come to the table with different skill sets, different ways of communication that resonates better than others. And if you're a parent of multiple kids, I'm sure you come to a quick understanding that your 2 kids, while you want them to be happy and healthy and successful in life, that certain messaging and certain methods of parenting works with one that is not as effective with the other. And so you adjust, right? You would naturally, as a parent, you adjust given the circumstances in front of you. And the same thing as a supervisor or as a part of a work team is that, certain people come to the table with different strengths, and you want to definitely work and play with those strengths while you also shore up areas where maybe they're not performing as well, but you're accounting for that. It extends all the way into what we design and what we build in our industry and who benefits. What we build in different communities and how we go about doing that is really also human decisions that we make all the time. And we account for that all the time. We don't do the exact same thing everywhere. We have levels of service that we'd like to meet, but we understand that communities are built differently. The infrastructure is different in one neighborhood than another, perhaps. It could be as simple as the age of the infrastructure. And so we have to account for those things as we go into fix longstanding, let's say, flooding issues. Low-lying areas are different than areas that are up on a hill. And so just how we go about thinking about problem solving has to account for all that. All this to say that we practice elements of equity, of thinking about differences of where people are at all the time, whether or not you're a parent, whether or not you are part of a work team or supervising multiple people, or you're trying to design a solution to a long-standing flooding problem in any one neighborhood, that we are already practicing equity all the time. And that it extends also, of course, to the experience of our workforce as we come to understand that people have very different experiences working in our industry. And we want to make those experiences positive for everybody. And so by listening to people, by engaging proactively with our membership, which is 30,000 folks from every state in the United States, that in sharing and listening to all of that, that the solutions we build and opening ourselves to be inclusive really is about problem solving for everybody and in an engaged manner, in a respectful manner, in appreciating people's expertise and voice, regardless of whether or not you have a doctorate or a master's degree or college degree, or you just went to high school, that everyone's voice is valued. And so that's a real commitment from the Water Environment Federation to really move in that direction as a key value that we'd like to demonstrate every day as we interact with folks like you and other people involved to support our industry.
Yeah, thanks for that, Steve. And that's really good, just a perspective, both coming from WEF, but just also really practically of just how we, in all of our, interactions, whether it's, in a family or at work or around our community, how we are engaging other people, and that is really part of all of what we're talking about really happens in our daily life. We might not call it exactly that, but it really starts to be part of that. And so being aware of that and some of the trainings I know you've done, and you've also lived it out when formerly at Seattle Public Utilities, and really bringing some of those questions of equity into your capital decision making and those, which is really good. And that's, I guess, maybe in the next piece I want to just talk through, again, from that utility perspective. But, as you mentioned, Steve, too, just about affordability and equity and how we approach our customers and the rates that we charge. Terrence, I know you've been very instrumental and part of that in the city of Baltimore, Public Works, and making sure that there's equity among your customers and the rates and how you approach that. So just wanted to see if you could share a little bit about some of the programs you have in place that you've been involved with, and just how that has played out over the last 4, 5, 6 years or more. Terrence?
It's good. Thank you so much, Jamie. It's a privilege to be here, especially on this panel with so many industry leaders to speak about Water for All. I'll just give you guys a little brief history about Water for All. Water for All is a water billing discount program designed to provide more equitable access to financial assistance for eligible Baltimore City residents. The Water Assistance Program provides a monthly or annual discount for water and sewer costs based on a percentage of a resident's income. Tenants who do not directly pay their water bill are eligible to apply for water payment assistance. That's a very huge thing, because within Baltimore City, within the new legislation for Water for All, we're able to get people, we have so many renters within Baltimore City, we're able to get people that aren't own homeowners able to, but they're still paying a water bill through a lease or anything like that, to still be able to get water for all services to pay for the water bill. So also want to say that the Water for All program came from Ordinance 20-468, which is a comprehensive water accountability and equity act, which provides assistance, rights, and protections for water and wastewater customers, which has been huge. And that was done in 2020 with our elected officials through Baltimore City. Another thing I want to let you know who's eligible for water for all assistance. Baltimore City residents are eligible for water for all. You have to have an income below 200% of the federal poverty guidelines. Basically, that's a 4-member household. If somebody that's the whole household's making about $64,300 would be able to get approved for water for all, which is huge. Also, they either have to be a homeowner and also a tenant. And what I mean by tenant, they have to be paying, their name has to be on the water bill. They actually have to have a lease agreement, which I was stating before, saying that they are responsible for making payments to the water bill. One of the things that we get this question asked all the time within City of Baltimore, especially for water for all, how are the discounts calculated? I'm not gonna lie, Jamie, when I was my 9th grade, I was in algebra. I didn't do good in algebra 1, but there's a formula that you do this to get the discount. The formula is this: is C equals B minus A times A. What is that? C equals the credit amount. That's the amount that you would get for your discount. The B is the consumption costs and fees. That's basically your water bill. The 3 charges that we have and the fees that all add up to get the monthly water bill. Also your income. Depending how much you make, it's all capped out at 1%, 2%, 3%. So if you're between 100 and 200, you get a 3%. If you're between 50 and 100, you get 2%. And then I think it's so on, 50, you get 1%. So that's how that is calculated. So basically, for a family of 4, 62, 300, if you had a bill of $1,200, your discount would probably be about $800 a year. Approximately, to give you an idea, that would help out. So they're probably asking, once you receive the discount, how are these funds distributed to our water customers? They're done 2 ways. It's either if you're a homeowner or a tenant on the water bill, the credits apply directly to your water account. We do that directly. There's no thing that you have to do. If you're renting and you have to pay a landlord, we send out or you're behind a central master meter, we send you out a check, which you in turn are supposed to pay your landlord for your water services for the month. So that's one thing. But I also wanted to tell you, Jamie, and the panel, some of the things that we've done within this program, what we've done since March of 2022. For instance, we've had about 8,221 homeowners approved for water for all since March of 2022. We've had about 3,524 tenants approved for water for all. So the total amount approved for water for all since March of 2022 is $11,170,000 that we have distributed to help assist with the water affordability for Baltimore City residents. Out of that 11,170,000, 6.82 went to homeowners and 4.35 million went to tenants to pay for their water bill, to assist with that. Another thing that we've done for the Water for All program, just to let you guys know the bigger picture of it, that we've had about 18,000 applications to submit to be part of the Water for All program. Out of those 18,000, 11,111 are homeowners, and about 6,787 are tenants. The median income for people applying and receiving Water for All discounts is about $16,670 for the Baltimore City resident that's receiving the Water for All discount. And another thing, Jamie, I know panel members brought this up before, was the LIWAP program. That's another assistance program that was done by the state, a federal program that assisted our water customers. For instance, for the City of Baltimore, we had about 3,141 customers that received this benefit for about $2.3 million. So that alone was huge, giving another additional assistance applied to Water for All as well. That really helped out many of our Baltimore City residents that needed it.
Yeah, that's great, Terrence, and that's awesome to see just, how you guys have been able to use that program and really directly affect, some of your customers throughout your service area. So That's really cool to see. And I know you've got other programs in place like Promise Pay too, just to again help making sure that there's just equity and equitable distribution of those to all of your customers. I think the other perspective I wanted to touch on today too is just around, just within utilities and within, the workforce development and training and recruitment. How does diversity, equity, and inclusion really play into that? And so, I know Kellie, in some of your not your current roles specifically, but some of your other former roles, you've probably dealt with that pretty closely. How does that play out, or how have you seen that impacted at MSD and other places you've been at?
Well, I think it's super important as we talked about what does DE&I mean, and it really is when you're looking at your workforce about retaining the individuals that you do have, and making sure that they feel included in that culture and environment of the utility, as well as the recruitment and attraction of new talent, right? And the way you do those things are not you do them simultaneously, but they're not the same thing, right? And so when you're looking internally at retention and ensuring that your policies, you want to make sure that you're doing what you say you're going to do. That's number one, right? If you say you value diversity and you value inclusion, then you need to make sure that your policies, that your practices, that your procedures are aligning with your values. Um, One of the ways that you can do that is, doing a culture and a climate assessment where internally hear from your employees about whether you're focused on communication, whether you're focused on other opportunities, promotions or transfers or other professional development, within the organization. You want to also make sure that when you're doing that, you're looking at best practices, that you're still being innovative, that you're doing things efficiently. I think Steve mentioned AI, that you're still looking at what that being a utility of the future looks like and how you'll have to maintain your case for that. Um, as well as other things, right? It's about relationship building. It's
Mhm.
about making sure that you're working collaboratively. I'm sure all organizations of any size, right? You still have some silos but how do you make sure that you have those relationships? I did that in a couple of ways here at Louisville MSD. Number one, I did some courageous conversations. At that time in 2020, it's more specifically around race, because it wasn't something that we talked about here at work. And so creating a specific space and being intentional around that
Yeah,
was one of the things that we did. Like I said, there was much civil unrest and it was all around us, right?
right.
And still had employees going to the field, and people here in Louisville, actually, you were driving right past the epicenter of the protest. So it was important to talk about that because we're people, and you bring those things to work with you. And so it was important to create that space. And as you do that, you begin to listen to each other, learn more about each other. And if you know more about each other as you continue to work, when there is a difference of opinion and some sort of conflict resolution that you're working through, at least you're able to say, well, I do know this person. And not only have I worked with them, but we've been able to share experiences with each other. And you kind of understand that perspective as well. Another way that, and we do this we're reading, I think we're probably on our third or fourth book here at Louisville MSD, is we have book club. I started the book club when I came here. We started off with some historical references in the books, and then we went on to just some practical leadership development tools that we could learn and read about and discuss as a group in a safe space with no judgment, as we learn from each other and we're able to continue to kind of talk about those things. Before I mentioned the culture and climate assessment, those were being done here at Louisville MSD before I got here. And we're still doing those by different divisions, right? And listening to each other, as well as employee engagement surveys. Another way to really kind of build that as you go is to be really intentional. And so sometimes that means you still have to look at your data, because your data will help you tell the story that you also need to tell. And you got to evaluate and measure, right? Because let's be clear, we don't pay attention to stuff sometimes if we're not measuring it and evaluating it and putting the resources toward it. So continue to collect your data, continue to disaggregate that data.
Yeah.
And that's not just, then you've got the qualitative side of that, right? Do you need to do focus groups? Do you need to have some other commentary around within those engagement surveys and assessments so that you can actually hear the story behind the numbers, right? You need to have both of those in a fair amount. I would also say that recognition programs, employee recognition programs, and really understanding how an appreciation of each other and what we're doing to support not only the mission but each other um, is a good way to also do that. And then training, but training's not your beginning, and you can't say I trained y'all and now y'all know when you're done. I always say that training is just the beginning, right? You train to set expectations and to change behavior. So just like if you practice a sport or something of that nature, you train, you practice, you train, and you practice, right? To get that behavior change. So start with just some cultural competency trainings and things of that nature, and not just on heavy-handedness of compliance with procedures or policy, but you want to make sure that those things are aligned once again with your values. So those are just some couple of tools that you can just actually start off with, but be intentional. And you can't assume that your workforce knows what you want them to say and do and be. And you've got to be very conscious that, as I said, you are speaking what you're doing and that your values are aligning with what you say is important. And if that is inclusion, and if that is equity, and you can call it whatever it is you want to call it, but you have to have it because as you attract new talent, they are expecting that as well. Right. And I
Yeah.
know we've all heard the story, right? Culture eats strategy for breakfast, lunch, or whatever meal we want it to be, right? Because if you haven't engaged with your people, and the people is your culture, and it's all those different pieces, but the people will tear it up, will tear your strategy to pieces if they're not aligned, if they're not on board, if they're not bought in, and they don't feel as though it matters if they do. Your employees are your ambassadors. You're your biggest champions, right? Not only are they sharing their experiences at work, positive or negative, but they're also sharing those outside of work with family, with friends, with anybody that they're engaging with. And you want them to be able to say that my organization values me. They value what I think. I like coming to work here. It's not perfect, right? But good or bad, I like it here, and you would like it here too. And that will help you with your recruitment, particularly in things that are hard or difficult to hire for, or you've got positions that have lots of turnover in. Internally, you can also support those things with giving people mentors, with ensuring that your supervisors know how to provide coaching when someone needs some upskilling, right? Um, Employee resource groups or affinity groups are also important and can provide that extra support sometimes that other employee organizations can't because they're together. And they're also a really good, recruitment tool as well as for retention. And so those are just a couple of things of how we see DE&I played out at work. And really, as I said, it's really about engaging that employee in a way that they feel as though what they say matters, their contribution is important, and also allowing them that level of professional development and progression that they see for themselves as well.
Yeah. Kellie, those are some really good and practical examples of just, how that works within a utility and ideas for other utilities out there and listeners here just to take back to their own utilities, just how to start to integrate and implement some of those practical solutions and tools that you shared. And again, that, coming back to the whole piece of this, really being about the culture and making sure people have the opportunity to share their opinions and their voice and building that culture too. So thank you for that. That was excellent. And next, I just want to, shift gears a little bit and again look at that perspective from the private side and the consulting side too. So Gary, I want to see if you could just kind of share, maybe starting a little high level, just within other consulting firms and engineering firms around the country, what are you seeing in terms of how DE&I is integrated into those companies and how that's being played out on the private and consulting side?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Yeah, I've been in the water consulting field my whole career, so over 3 decades, and it's really been a privilege to work with so many different cities, including Louisville and others. And really, as a consultant, we work as an extension of public water utilities, and so DEI is very important to the private sector as well, especially in water consulting. So certainly echo a lot of the previous comments from the participants here in terms of the need for DEI and again, promoting that in the private sector. DEI programs really vary from company to company. But I would say the vast majority of firms have something. And there was a recent study by the American Council of Engineering Companies, or ACEC, that kind of looked into the impact of DEI on engineering firms, and it spelled out a lot of the benefits of having a DEI program, along with some of the challenges and different things firms are doing. But the one big consistent thing was just creating this and cultivating a culture of belonging. And kind of echoing a little bit of Kellie's comments, just having that in place and then living it so your staff believe in it. And so definitely a lot of benefits. Some of the financial benefits of DEI programs can be hard to measure, particularly right now, because there's such a competition for talent. And so, but I think the vast majority of the firms are trying to recruit a diverse workforce, and then also ensuring that really that equal opportunities, that's a huge piece of this as well. But I will say, to be honest, there's just simply not enough diversity in the consulting field right now, and we as an industry need to continue to work and do more on that front. And so, Hazen and a lot of firms are doing, really taking doing some things in the near term, but also taking a long-term approach to this by investing in STEM. And, we're doing that through, STEM scholarships that we implement each year. We're trying to tie those into internships, and there's a variety of different programs out there. Youth work program is one of them. I know we're participating in that in places like Raleigh and Baltimore as well. Trying to recruit students from diverse backgrounds to intern. So the other things we're doing, just trying to get more involved in the communities that we're working with, and that's promoting STEM in communities. So going and participating in elementary school, junior high, high school events, and really what we've done at Hazen is we're very fortunate to have a very robust group of young professionals, and kind of building on a little bit of Kellie's comments, really empowering them to help kind of make this happen. And that's going really well, but it's a long-term investment. One of the other things we're doing, and I know a lot of other firms are doing, Steve talked about, from the WEF perspective, some of the things. The other thing we're involved with as a sponsor of the WEF Inflow program, plan to continue to do that. So I think, while we're trying to do more in the near term in terms of recruiting a more diverse workforce and retaining that workforce, of course, including, recruiting at different HBCUs, it's about also not just going and recruiting at these places, but building relationships with professors, giving presentations to student groups about the water industry. And again, just constantly trying to get the word out to a variety of different students of all different backgrounds. So also getting involved in student chapters of NSBE and organizations like that. So those are a lot of the things that are going on right now, Jamie.
Yeah, that's great, Gary. And yeah, I've been able to see some of those programs firsthand and just the impact and in the high school level here in Columbus and other locations as well. How do, in terms of, some of the supplier diversity programs as we're working with different utilities around the country, how does supporting that and as well as sharing some of the benefits, not just for maybe a larger consulting firm, but also for some of the smaller or some of the minority or women-owned business firms as well, how does that help to, again, benefit DEI across, across the different communities we're serving?
Well, I think it's really important that the private sector consulting community in general, that we're able to serve all the different communities in a variety of different aspects. We also, as a consulting industry, we need to better reflect and thus be able to better serve our clients. With all the different, engineers, scientists, other professionals with different backgrounds and experiences. And so that's the way we're going to best serve all the different challenges that our communities that we serve, that they face, and helping them address that. But, obviously a number of different utilities have MBE, WB, DBE programs. Our approach is really making sure that when we do get those firms involved, whether it's required or not, we try to create involvement, but making sure that it's a meaningful role on projects. And really what that does is it fosters that workforce development, and also the training of folks coming through those firms and allows those firms to flourish, as well as just provides overall better services, to our clients. So, at Hazen, we've enjoyed really good relationships with a number of DBE and other firms, and trying to not only serve as an incubator to new firms, but also helping those firms to diversify beyond the city that they started in, and again, ultimately help them grow and grow their workforce, which is going to help better serve the communities that we're all serving.
That's great. Yeah. Thanks for that, Gary. Just as we're starting to wrap up here today, any final thoughts, maybe something else someone else has mentioned here, or I know I've got some key takeaways from today as well, but any final thoughts from anyone else?
I'll weigh in, Jamie, just really quickly, which is, it really strikes me about the discourse currently right now is a real need for us to remind ourselves that listening and learning is a really key human value as well. And what we look for are for folks that are willing to be engaged in these kinds of discussions and not shut down. Because if we can remain open to listening to each other in a respectful way and learning from one another, we grow as individuals and we grow as communities. And then the second thing is, I think, related just to DEI generally, is that the healthiest communities are the ones where everyone is benefiting from all that we do as an industry, and that we're not leaving folks behind. And we, unfortunately, hear from time to time about different communities where there might have been, spiked levels of lead in the drinking water, or intensive levels of sewer backups. And when those kinds of crises, or a disaster like a tornado or a water-related event like a hurricane and flooding, And when those events hit us, they come at great human cost, right? And so building communities that are able to withstand a lot of that, and everyone is able to come along and benefit from all that we do, really is also about cost saving in that way too, right? Because we all end up paying for a lot of those things that went awry. So the commitment to this type of work is really a vital component of a healthy society. And we just need to be able to engage each other in healthy dialogue and conversation, and keep our two ears open, so that we're willing to really listen and learn about what this is about, and not just um, uh, try to throw away or otherwise lock up something that has very little deep opportunity for deeper discussion. And so I just want to say thank you for this, because I think this is one of many opportunities that we should be promoting to really encourage dialogue and learning, and all things related to this effort. So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And again, I think that's just a tremendous point. Again, and just as we carry this forward and carry on these discussions and conversations, and having some of those conversations, within our utilities and places of employment, and in our communities as well. Just that, it is about, really just bringing everyone together, being able to be open and listen to everybody. Again, as we look at different legislative cases and how those play out, and interpreting that and implying those, as well as within our utilities, and how that affects, hiring and workforce developments. It does play into the culture of everything that we do and we're involved with. So again, to Kellie and Terrence, Steve, Gary, really appreciate your guys' expertise and your time today, and sharing some of your just very good perspectives of how this plays out. And I'll also say, again, some of the comments today, just to all of our listeners, we've talked a little bit about affordability, we've talked about careers and workforce development. We have some of our earlier podcasts touch on those subjects as well, so feel free to check those out. But again, thank you all for your time and input on this today. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Zanetta just to wrap up our time.
Thank you, Jamie. And I want to just thank you, as always, for doing such an excellent job of moderating. And again, to want to thank all of our panelists for being here. You all have done such an excellent job. You know how difficult these things are to get everybody together based on your schedules. And I really want to appreciate you giving your time and expertise. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that. Also, just want to thank you. It probably seems easy to you guys, but for just giving up your time and be willing to have this conversation, because there's other utilities that just are afraid to even have this kind of conversation right now. And I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge that, of your willingness to continue to have this discussion and during these difficult times. Mr. Hopner, as always, is good to see you, and thank you for giving your perspective from a private industry perspective. Mr. Hermai with the WEF. I just want to thank you for articulating WEF's visions and their consistency and sticking to it. I think that the leadership that you all are having is going to be very impactful in what is needed for the water sector. Mr. Jennings, as always good to have another perspective from a utility, and just sharing what your all's program is what you're doing. And again, last but certainly not least, Ms. Watson, our general counsel. Can't steal her. And we just want to thank you for sharing your expertise and giving the perspective, because she knows that she has walked us all off the shelf and ledge at MSD, because we've all been asking her a ton of questions, and I don't even know how she was able to have the time, because it's a constant moving thing for her every day. But I do just want to thank you all for doing this, and I hope our listeners, you've learned something today that you can go back and share, and to all of our ratepayers and stakeholders, because that's what we're all trying to do, is have a safe, clean community, and our commitment to doing that. So hopefully this helps. So thanks again.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And with that, we are going to conclude our recording.